Okay, let's take a look at this problem. A local school has a sign with changeable letters outside, and they want to use red letters to put the month on the top line each month. So the question for us is, how many of each letter do they need to cover all 12 months? And so what we can do is look at each month individually. So if we look at January and we start counting out the letters, we figure out we need 2 A's, 1 J, 1 N, 1 R, 1 U, and 1 Y. And so then we could add the next month, and you can see some of the letters are repeated. There's another A here, and so we'll have an A, a B, and so on. If you look closely though, and when you look at this A, you might be tempted to count them and say, well, 1, 2, 3 so far, but really we're only going to display 1 month at a time. So really I have an asterisk here next to the 1 on February, because we already have 2 for January. So we don't need to buy another A for the next month. We can reuse one of the A's we had for this month for February. Same thing with the U and the Y. Those are common. We don't need to buy another letter for those. We already have them, and since they're not going to be used at the same time, that would cover it. We do have some new letters here, including in this case double R. So we have 2 R's this time instead of 1. So we do need 1 more R there. And then we could look at the next month, March. And of course the same thing, we have an A, but we should be covered because we had 2 for January, and then R will be covered. Even though we need an R here, we already have 2 from before, so that kind of covers that requirement. And then we have new letters. So if we stopped right there and we said, hey, we just want 3 months, how this would work out would be, we need 2 letter A's because that's the most number of letter A's we need. We need 1 B for this month. We need 1 C for March, so on and so on. And we need 2 R's because February has the most number of R's that we would need for a month, at least so far. So we could continue that, and of course do all the rest of the months continuing the same way. So now we need to start thinking about it sort of programmatically. If we want to write a program for this, how would we do that? And my proposal would be something like this. I'm going to need to keep track of the letters, so I'm going to create an array of letters, and what I want is, again, arrays are usually indexed at 0 being first, so I want sub 0 to be letter A, and sub 1 to be letter B, and so on down the line. We're not going to do every letter. And then I'm going to have another array called letter count, and that's going to be my overall letter count for the total number of letters I need. And then just to keep things straight, I'm going to have a third one called word letter count. So I'm going to count the letters in each word, and really in this case I'm saying word, but I mean month. So I'll count, go through and count all the letters in each month, and then we'll make a comparison for that month to the total letter count so far to see, okay, do we have more letters in this month than any month before? And at the end, our letter count will be the total number of letters we need altogether. So let's look at an example. If we look at January, we're going to go through and create word letter count, and we're going to take the 2 A's and the 1 R, and of course we would do it for every letter, but just for demonstration purposes here, we're just going to look at these 4 letters. So we would have 2 A's and 1 R, and then essentially we would look at compare the 2, and since they're all zeroed out, the 2 A's is larger than 0, so we would put that over there. The 1 R was larger than 0, so that we put it over here. Then we go to the next month, and we fill in the letter count for February, and we get 1A, 1B, 2 R's. And then we go down the line and say, okay, well, 1A, well, we already have 2 A's. So in other words, 1 is less than 2, no problem, just leave it alone. 1 is greater than 0 for the B's. We didn't have a B before, so we need to take that and increase our letter count to match the word letter count in this case for B. And then we'll look at R and say, okay, well, there's 2. We only had 1 before, so we really need to move that over and make the R's 2. So this is what it would look like after February, and we would continue that through all the months. So for March, we look at 1A, 1C, and 1R, and we start comparing those. Well, we're not going to increase that one because we already have 2 A's. 0 B's, well, we already have 1, but we don't, we don't need to increase that. Oh, C's, we actually have 1 C, and we didn't have any before, so we need to add that into our letter count. And 1 is not going to affect 2, so we don't need to increase anything there. And we continue this process through all the rest of the months to get our answer. But what we want to do is write a program to do this. So we'll flip over to our code editor here, and we'll start creating the structures we talked about. Very first thing, I need to create an array with all the months in it. We didn't really show that before, but we do need the month names. So I'm going to create a string called month, and we'll initialize that, and we'll go ahead and put in the braces and put in each month for all the months. And so I'll just do that real quickly here through December. Don't forget our semicolon. And so now we have an array, so sub-0 being January, 1, February, March, and so on. And then we need to create our other arrays to deal with the letters. And so I'm going to create a character array called letters. And of course, we need 26 places because we'll have possibility of 26 letters. So 0 representing A, 1 is going to be B, and so on down the line. So that takes care of our letters array. We need a letter count. So we'll create another integer array to keep track of the count of each letter. And of course, that'll also be 26. So they'll kind of be parallel arrays. So the count of the letter A is going to be in letter count sub-0, and the actual letter will be in 0 there. Okay, so that A will be in 0. Let's go ahead and initialize these two arrays. We'll set up a for loop to go through 26 times. So we'll start I at 0 up to 25 and get there by 1. And so we'll go through here, and for letters, we're going to do letter sub I. So it's the subscript will go through 0 through 25 here for letters, and we're going to initialize each one. We'll use the ASCII code, and what we'll do is just use the capital letter. So if we look that up, capital letter A is going to be equal to 65. We need to increment that for each letter, so that's fine for A, which would be 0, so we'll just add in I each time. So we'll say plus I, and that way for A, which is going to be at the 0 index, it'll be 65, and then since we're going from 1 to 25, we'll just add 1 each time. So B will be 66, C will be 67, which corresponds to the ASCII chart. So that will initialize our letters to the letters we want. We'll use that later for the output. Now we need to initialize our letter count, which we'll just sub I, and the count is going to be 0 each time, so that'll just be equal to 0, and that's that. The next thing we want to do, I'm going to go ahead and create an upper bound here for our month array. So in this case, we know how many months we have, but as you might imagine, you could reuse this program for something other than months. If we had different messages we wanted to put in the array that we wanted to change out periodically, and we want to know the letter count, this program could be reusable for that. So I'm just going to say not assume we have the 12 months here, and just find it out from the array. And so what I'll do is just do the size of month. Remember, you can do the old size of month divided by size of the first element of month. That's kind of the old way of doing it. In the new C++ standard, or newer C or ++ standard, we can just use the size of month, and that will give us our upper bound for that, so we can iterate through all the months. And so to do that, we'll set up our for loop, and of course we'll start at the index of 0. We'll stop at the upper bound we just found out, and of course we'll get there by 1 to go through each element of the array. Okay, so for each month we're going to have to go through all the letters of that month to do the letter count. So I'm going to create this temporary variable called cmonth, and we're going to set that equal to month sub I. So we're going to get the current month each time through the loop. Set that in our temporary variable for cmonth. And then, since each month is of different length, we're gonna find the length of each one, and we'll iterate through each character for each month. So we'll have another nested for loop here to go through each month as we get to it. Since they are different lengths, we need to find out what the current month length is. So we'll take that temporary variable we just had, cmonth, and we will find the length of it. That'll tell us how many characters. And then we can also take, remember the word letter count. We're going to keep track, create another array here, a word letter count, to find out the number of letters just in each month. So we'll set that up, and we'll initialize all of those to 0, since the count will be 0. Okay, and we can do that in the newer standard. Remember, if you don't have your compiler updated, you may need to make sure you're at a more modern compiler to be able to do some of these newer standard C++ statements. So let's set up our loop here to go through all the letters. So again, we'll just use a different, since we already got I, we'll say int j equals 0, and we're going to go from 0 to the length of the month we just looked at, so the m length that we just figured out, and of course we're going to get there by 1, so j++. So as we go through the length of each one, j is going to represent the position in each one of these things. So j being 0, we're looking at, if we're looking at the first month, we'll be looking at the first letter. Okay, so we're going to create an index variable here, and I'm going to set my index equal to cmonth sub, and that's going to be j. Okay, and so I'm creating a temporary variable just to point at where my index is, and now because I put my months in this way, I could have saved myself a little work whenever I put the months in, if I put them all in uppercase, because here I was using the ASCII value 65, which is an uppercase letter A, and I've got my letters set to uppercase. I'm going to go ahead and convert each letter in each month and make sure they're all uppercase. And since my letters on the sign are uppercase, same thing. So I'm going to do the 2 upper for that particular letter as we go through the J loop here, and I'm going to subtract 65 from it. So if I'm on the second letter here and I convert it to capital letter A, then I need to do the same thing. I need to index it and make it match with the index of my array. I need to subtract out 65 from the ASCII value, okay, that I'm going to get by looking at the letter. So that'll be my index. The next thing I want to do is look at the word letter count for each letter in the month. So I'll set the index in here, okay, that I just found for that particular letter, and I'm going to increment it by 1. So again, for the letter A, it's going to take that, find 65 for the capital letter A, subtract 65 to get down to my index of 0, and then 0 index, my word letter count is going to match up with my letters array here to increment A by 1. Okay. Now I could have squeezed all this 2 upper and everything in here, but this, for explanation purposes, is a little bit easier to lay out line by line, and sometimes it's probably better to write it that way in code. Even though you could make it shorter, the key is make it more maintainable. So if I look at this code a year from now, how quickly can I pick it up and understand it again? Because a year from now I probably won't remember exactly what I did before. So the more self-documentation I can do, like creating good variable names, the better and easier it will make it for me to maintain in the future, or for other programmers to look at in the future. Okay, so we've incremented our word letter count, so we're good there. That'll take care of our count for each letter, and this loop will take care of each month itself. But while we're still looking at a particular month, just like we did before where we're looking at the word letter count, we want to compare the word letter count to the letter count, which is ultimately going to be our the number of letters we need overall. The word letter count is just for the current month. Okay, so I need to go through, after I've got my word letter count for a particular month, I'm going to go through again, and this time I'm going to say K, and I'm just going to go through each month. So from 0 to 25, get there by 1. And what I want to do is compare the word letter count to the letter count to see if I need more letters for the current month than I've ever needed before. And so what I'll do is just put a simple if statement in there and say if my word letter count is greater than the letter count from before. So all we're saying is, hey, is the word letter count for the current month, the letter count for A, higher than any month we've had before? If it is, then we need to increase the overall letter count. So like before where we had a couple of R's come up, okay, we need to increase that count, so we buy 2 R's instead of 1. So that's simple enough. We'll just set letter count sub K equal to the word letter count, since it's greater than letter count, and sub K, and that should take care of our letter count and updating it. The only thing we really have left is to output our list, so we know kind of our shopping list for letters. So I'll go through outside this I loop one more time. I can reuse I now, so I'll go ahead and go through 0 through 25 again, same style loop, and all we want to really do is go through these 2 arrays here to say, hey, show me my letter and show me my letter count. Do I need to buy those letters? And so I'll just see out letters sub I. That'll be like my letter A, B, C, and then I'm going to go ahead and do a \T here. That's a tab, and then letter count sub I. So again, those are parallel arrays. So I here and I there. We'll get the letter count for each one inline. Okay, and so that'll print out a list of all my letters. I could go one more here because I know just by being familiar with the months, there are going to be some letters that, at least if we're using months, we're not going to really need letters for. So I don't really want those on my shopping list. So let me go ahead and add an if statement in here to filter out those letters like Z that I know I'm not going to need. So all I'm going to do is say if my letter count is 0, I really don't need to print out that letter. Okay, so I'll just do letter count sub I, and if the letter count sub I is not equal to 0, then I do want to print it. So we've tried that out. That should be what we need to do. So let's compile and run this and see what happens. And so here's the list we get. Looks like we need 2 A's. Our R's come out similar, although we didn't go through all the months before. Looks like the most numerous letter is going to be E3, so we do get a list of all the letters we would need to spell out each month, 1 month at a time. I like to look at programming solutions to everyday problems like this. So hopefully this was interesting and helpful. And of course this is adaptable into the future because it's not necessarily for a month. We could change any kind of sign where we're changing out messages. We can change out the words we're going to reuse and reuse this program. So hopefully you found this helpful, and I'll see you next time.